At the end of the day, it's not about what you have or even what you've accomplished. It's about what you've done with those accomplishments. It's about who you've lifted up, who you've made better. It's about what you've given back. Denzel Washington. Welcome to Inspire Vision. Our sole purpose is to elevate the lives of others and to inspire you to do the same.
Rich, welcome to the show.
Well, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Hey, I'm excited to have you here. So where are you from?
From Cambridge, England.
Okay, and so that's where you're located now.
That is right now. Yep, just between Cambridge and London.
Oh, I love it. I love it. The other day I interviewed someone from Peru. So it's just like it's becoming worldwide. I love it.
Yeah, so, that's slightly more exotic.
Yeah. So what I'd love for you to do is to kind of share with the audience your background, who you are, some of the things that you've accomplished, because you have quite a amazing background, and then kind of the journey that led you to this point in writing your book, your ebook, and also just doing what you're doing.
Oh, crikey. Okay, sure. Well, look, when I left university, I wanted leadership experience as soon as I could. So the fastest way to get that was to get my hands dirty in the supply chain. And I ended up starting off working the night shift on the Strepsils packing line in a factory. And I worked my way up and ended up running a $1 billion global supply chain, sitting on the board of a listed company. And look, on my journey, what I realized was that I seem to enjoy change, and that seemed to be quite rare. Certainly not unique, but most people I found resist most change most of the time. And that doesn't really matter where you are, what your background is, what your job title says, how many stripes you've got on your arm. In fact, sometimes senior leaders can be the most resistant to change. So, I kind of decided to kind of make that my life. So I had climbed a corporate ladder. I ran that supply chain. I was CEO of a few companies. I lived in Sweden. I spent 9 years in New Zealand before coming back here. So yeah, I've been around a bit, and I've worked in most corporate functions. I've been very lucky to do that. I've done manufacturing, purchasing, logistics, sales, marketing. So I've worked from Aberdeen to Auckland. So I've subjected myself to a fair bit of change, and what I realised was ultimately, although I enjoyed being a CEO, getting up every morning to make rich people slightly richer wasn't really doing it for me. And when I realized that actually my vocation was, to help as many people as I could enjoy rather than endure the life of change that surely lies ahead for us all, then it became a very easy decision actually just to jump off the wheel and take that big leap that I'd always been too scared to do, of setting up on my own, which I did 10 years ago, and dedicating my career to developing models and techniques and training and coaching that helps people become more open to the idea of change, which is what adaptability is all about. My pet subject.
Yeah. And what I find interesting is that I'm never to the level you are, believe me, but for a while I was working with very small businesses as a business consultant and mentor.
Yeah.
And what I found was that everything that they were experiencing in business relative to certain areas, they were experiencing in life. And when we changed an element in their business, it changed an element in their life. And so today, as I had mentioned earlier before we came on the show, I really want to focus on all of those concepts that you've developed that I know are just helping the leaders of these big companies and so forth. But I guarantee you these concepts would help anyone who is listening today as far as how can they become more adaptable to change. Because as you said, and you made the comment, you were so fearful of making that change, and yet
Oh,
you
I
did it.
was.
You did it.
Yeah.
Okay. And so let's talk about that as far as change, and why is it so difficult for people to make changes? And we'll talk about, your focus on that adaptability, but what is so difficult for us to make change in our lives?
Well, the good news is that it's not our fault. It's well, it kind of is. It, it's an evolutionary reaction that we have. We've developed over the last 50,000 years as a self-protecting mechanism to perceive any change as a potential threat to our security. Whatever situation we're in right now might not be ideal. We might only just be able to cover the mortgage. We might be having a few arguments with friends or family, or but whatever is going on in our lives, we are actually safe and secure. And if we're not, then we're very prepared to change to get to that base level of, the bottom levels of Maslow's hierarchy. But for most of us, lucky enough to, have a roof over our heads and enjoy the basics, what we really want to do is just batten down the hatches, because any change could threaten to take that away from us. So we actually have mechanisms. The fear mechanism neurologically is designed to stop us from thinking. So when we are faced with fear, when we are faced with a clear and present danger, that is the cause of fear, that saber-toothed tiger jumping out in front of us. And what our brain does at that moment is it actually shuts itself down from thinking. Imagine that. The world's largest supercomputer. Imagine what size the off switch must be. But that's exactly what we do. And we stop thinking. And we go into this knee-jerk fight or flight or freeze response that everybody knows. We're all biochemists. And we actually just knee-jerk respond. And that was a self-protecting mechanism that made us move rather than think, which could have been the difference between being life and lunch, back in the day. But actually, if you look in your HR manual at work, sorry to go back to work, but both of those things, fighting or fleeing from work, are both disciplinary offences these days. They're not terribly helpful. So we've got to find ways to override that. And just coming back to your very first point in your question there, what I love about talking to people and helping people become more adaptable is you're absolutely right. Even if I'm doing this in a corporate environment, I say to my leaders, this is a skill that doesn't stop at 5:30 in the afternoon. This is the way that most organizations deal with change, is that they treat it like a business process. We're going to put in a new IT system and it's going to have a beginning, a middle, and an end. It's a project. But actually change, adaptability isn't a business process. It's an attitude to life. And when you start exploring, what gets me very excited is when you start exploring our relationship with change, when you can start to see even negative change as the opportunity to make a positive difference, then you start seeing change for what it really is, which is that it's the chance to make a difference in life. And then you get into a whole existential debate about, why are we here? And if the answer to that is anything other than we just want to sit on our hands until the pension, the 401k kicks in, then if you're actually here to make any kind of difference, then grabbing hold of change, embracing change, even the worst kind of change, the loss of a loved one, losing your job, whatever it is, it's not just about resilience. Resilience is designed as having the ability to bounce back. Adaptability is all about having the ability to bounce higher and to take whatever that negative was and actually emerge from that bigger, faster, better, stronger than you were before. And I believe that anybody can do that in any situation if they so have the will, and there are the means to learn that.
Yeah, and you know it's interesting. I remember that when I was working with dentists in particular, one of the first things I'd say to them when I started working with them as a client is I said, you know, you've got 5 employees. I can guarantee you one of them is going to be gone within 6 weeks. And the reason I knew that is because within that percentage, there was always one person that really didn't want to be there. And to some degree, they were actually shooting everybody else in the back without anyone knowing it. And it always happened. It always happened. But when you think about business, when we think about people and their lives, how often do we find ourselves stuck in a situation and we keep living our life, keep experiencing whatever we're experiencing, or in business, keep experiencing that same thing. And the fear of change, of the unknown, is so strong that oftentimes it prevents us from doing anything about it. My daughter was getting her master's degree in sociology and was ready to move on to a PhD. And she called me and she says, Dad, I'm just not feeling right about something. And it took her probably 6 months to realize that she didn't want to go on and get that PhD. She wanted to get out into the business world and wanted more of a balanced life than what she saw was going to happen. And what I found was the fear of the unknown for her was so great that it really took her a long time to make that decision. So as you work with businesses, or if you're working with people in general, how do you help them to understand, number one, that change can be valuable in their lives? It can literally change their experiences of life or of business. And number two, how to overcome that fear of change and become adaptable to where they can make the change and make it a positive experience for themselves.
Sure. So what I do is I start off talking to people about their fears and anxieties. Now, it's important to differentiate between the two. We use those two terms interchangeably in common parlance, but actually they are different things. And that's not just a nomenclature point of intellectual interest. If we understand that they are different, then we can actually treat them differently too. So fear is your reaction to a clear and present danger. It's that saber-toothed tiger that appears. Anxiety is what you feel when that saber-toothed tiger disappears back off into the long grass and you don't know where he is anymore. And all of a sudden you're wondering if you're the fastest runner in the village, or more appropriately, the slowest. Anxiety is your reaction to your future perceived negative state. So immediately there are differences, right, between fear and anxiety. Yes. Fear is your reaction to something that's real and something that's actually happening right now. You've just been told that you're going to be let go. Anxiety is makey-uppy stuff in your mind about what could possibly go wrong in the future. And here's again, it's another self-protecting mechanism. Anxiety is a car crash of two absolutely brilliant things that we have going for us as humans. The first is, and it's one of the reasons we run the planet for better or worse, is that we have this ability to imagine a future that doesn't yet exist. We have imagination. And the other is this self-protecting mechanism where we have negativity bias, as the psychologists call it, which is we tend to think about what could possibly go wrong. Again, that's really good if you're out on the savannah hanging around with saber-toothed tigers. On their own, each of those is really useful. But as you can see, put those two things together, a highly active imagination with the ability to see the negative or to focus on the negative. And all of a sudden, what we do is we take a potential negative scenario, then we multiply that by another potential negative scenario. Then eventually we multiply that by our phone number. And what we've created for ourselves is a cliff, and we end up perceiving ourselves at rock bottom, at the bottom of that. And a study done at Penn State University said that 90% of what we worry about never actually happens. Now, that's not to dismiss the anxiety that is 100% real, that results from that. But we consume a huge amount of energy worrying about stuff that doesn't matter. So one of the antidotes to anxiety is what psychologists call rational emotional behavior therapy, or what I call rational thoughtfulness, which is you have to sit as judge and jury on yourself and actually question, is this thought that I'm having, is it really real? Is it likely to happen? Or am I just playing it so safe that it's affecting my ability to actually do anything about controlling my future? Right. So once we've understood that in itself, scales fall from people's eyes. Clients I've had, when they understand and they've got a label and they can better understand why they're feeling what they're feeling and why they're feeling it, that is half the journey. And look, I've got a whole bunch of antidotes to combat the reasons that we resist change that generate fear and anxiety. But once you've done that, what you're effectively doing is helping people to get out of their own way. Fear can be controlled. You can't stop feeling fear, but you can control it. You can absolutely manage your anxiety. The American Psychological Association says that anxiety is imminently treatable. The problem is identifying it, of course, because we're all really world class at keeping our anxieties hidden, aren't we? And once you've got out of your way, then you can start seeing change for what it is, which is a couple of things: the ability to make a difference, to be relevant, to add value. And the other one, ultimately, it gives us the freedom to grow as individuals, to take that negativity or whatever it was. We can go from negative to neutral. We can go from good to great. Change gives us the opportunity to learn about ourselves in ways that the status quo can only dream of. And that's what I really try and instill in people, is that even when bad things happen to you, look, good things might happen to you. Bad things are definitely going to happen to you. If you've already got friends and loved ones, at some point you're going to lose friends, or you're going to physically lose loved ones. These things happen, but it's not what happens to you in life. Of course, it's how you deal with it and your attitude towards those events. If you can see change in those terms, then that kind of changes everything.
Well, and one of the things that I have found, and I love the philosophy on this, is that as we're living our lives, we set certain goals, we may reach them, and all of a sudden it's like, what do we do next? I just achieved what I wanted to achieve. And again, then you get into this whole concept of change. And I use the word adventure. And for me, it's like, you know what? When you can get to the point that you're going to be willing to have an adventure in your life, it makes an entire difference in your experience of life. It creates curiosity, it creates excitement. And as you say, so often, it gives us the ability to make a difference in other people's lives.
That's absolutely spot on, Doug, because let's go to definitions, because you've used the word curiosity there. If you look up adaptability in the dictionary, it says something like the ability to adjust to new conditions, which is entirely correct, a little bit dry, and almost entirely useless at explaining to us what it is and what it feels like to be more adaptable. So I've redefined it along three lines. It is about having the curiosity, you're bang on, to see the need or opportunity for change. It is about having the courage to actually make that change happen. And that speaks to your word adventure. And it's about having the velocity to make the right turn in the right direction at the right time. Because as we all know, if you do the right thing at the wrong time, it can still yield the wrong result, unfortunately. So if you've got all of those three things, and if you can see any change that you face in those terms, then you're absolutely right. Couldn't agree with you more. Life is an adventure. And
Well,
adventures don't always go according to plan.
yeah, and as you say that third one, we do the right thing at the right time. Sometimes we'll do the wrong thing at the right time, or we'll do the right thing at the wrong time. And in
That's
my
right. Yeah.
mind, when that occurs, then you get into this concept of gratitude and the fact that, you know what, I just made a mistake, and rather than beating myself up about it, what did I learn? Because we're not perfect in our decisions. We're not 100% perfect ever. So to be able to move forward and to keep on that adventure and recognize, okay, I'm going to make some mistakes, but I'm going to learn from them and readapt. And that's where you get into the adaptability again. All of a sudden, you find yourself on that path of moving this way and that way and this way and that way. But ultimately, you're going on a straight line if you were to do
Yeah. Do you know
the
what?
curve.
This is a point. Again, I completely agree. It's a point of frustration for me. Back to my corporate environment, that there's a lot of talk by people like me and you on shows like this, saying, look, it's okay to fail, and I absolutely believe that. Fail stands for first attempt in learning. And Nelson Mandela, I either win or I learn. Either way, I win. And all of these things are true. The trouble is that in the real world, I see an awful lot of leaders, and even if people are only putting the context of this discussion in their personal lives, most of us go to work. That there is still a resistance to change our attitude. That we were brought up, I don't, maybe my generation, we were brought up with the idea that all failure is bad, all failure is negative. And I think for a lot of people in the real world, it's still very difficult for them to accept that failure is part of success, the journey towards success. And let alone, they had to grit their teeth to pat somebody on the back and say, you failed, but you tried hard, and you're made of the right stuff. And we really want our people to model this behavior, and ultimately we will succeed if we keep failing forwards. There's a lot of people that read articles about that stuff, listen to things like this, and just can't bring themselves to actually do it in the real world. But myself and people like you hopefully can get that message out there, that if you fail in a small way, if you fail in a small way that is reversible, where you go down the wrong path and you can come back up and go back down a different route, that's the kind of spirit of adventure that you need to embrace change, and for that to end up being successful.
Well, and it's really a mindset change. It's really, we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about general intelligence. I know you talk about adaptability intelligence,
Oh,
but the reality is it's a mindset that we have to change. So as you're working with corporate leaders and you see that they're so resistant to change, and you know that it really is a focus of that mindset that they have, and regardless of what's underneath that's causing that, how do you help them to change their mindset and begin to understand truly that change is okay and it's an adventure?
it's this kind of two-step approach. I suppose it's not really, no, it's not really carrot and stick, but it is about helping people get out of their own way. That in itself is big news for a lot of people who feel that kind of fear and anxiety. When you even say the word change, it conjures up all sorts. Your brain comes alive. An MRI scan of people who hear the word change, it will be a complete light show going on in there. What people have really struggled to understand, inherently, is that even negative change can be an opportunity for you to learn and grow and make a difference. That's the big difference. And I suppose when I say to people, can you remember the last time that you became more adaptable? I've only ever had one person say, yes, I can remember exactly when I became more adaptable. And it was the day after my best friend died. And I realized that life was for living, and I better start doing things pretty differently right now. It's pretty profound. For most people, they either don't believe it's possible, or they've never really thought about it, which is strange when you do think about it, given the world of increasing uncertainty and complexity that we live in. Our relationship with change is really about our relationship with life. And when you start painting a bigger picture like that for people, it helps them to become more comfortable with the idea. Ultimately, what we're trying to do here is get people to come outside of their comfort zone. And that, by definition, is an uncomfortable thing to do.
Yes.
So what you've got to do is convince people that they can get out of their own way. That there is a pot of honey at the end of the rainbow. There are reasons to embrace it. Oh, and by the way, if you wait until the platform is burning, then you are going to get burned, and it's better to jump on your own terms than be pushed when you absolutely have no option but to embrace change. So the motto of that you hear is change or be changed. It is absolutely true.
Well, and as you talk about, and I smiled big when you said it, convince people that they have to make a change or that they can make a change. In my mind, we can never convince anyone of anything. They need to convince themselves. So here's my question. As you're working with individuals, whether they're be in business or otherwise, how do you help them to understand that, number one, a change needs to occur, and number two, they can internally make that change?
So what you have to do, well, the way I do it anyway, is to tap into to people's hopes and dreams. I suppose it is maybe a bit a bit of a flowery way of saying it, but what is it that people want to achieve? Now, if the kind of people that I deal with are normally reasonably ambitious people, they haven't called me just to tell me that their life is fine and that they don't want to change anything.
Right.
So the people that I normally deal with do want some form of change. And what I also find out is that the issue is never the issue, and the reason that people contact me is never the real reason when we get down to it. But if you talk to people about what is it that blank canvas, what is it that you actually want to achieve, and then they will paint some picture for you that involves either a small or large degree of change. And then we go back to, well, okay, what's the reality right now? And then what are the hurdles that are stopping you? And then we just gently break down those hurdles. We understand what they are, lots and lots of questioning. Why do you think this is a hurdle? Why do you think it's something that either exists, because it may not? And if it does exist, why do you think that you can't overcome it? And then we'll look at examples in their life, and we'll talk about the best things that have happened to them, the worst things that have happened to them, and how they've coped. And what you'll always find is that people tend to underestimate themselves. And if you actually go digging, you don't have to do too much digging in the past. I'm not a psychoanalyst or anything. I'm just an ex-CEO who got excited about helping people deal with change. But what you'll find is people have actually been through probably more than they realize and come out the other side, maybe even stronger. So the path that they want to go on is actually a path they've already started along. And all I'm going to do is boost them and catalyze that journey with, a few antidotes to combat the reasons they resist change and a few stimulants to boost the reasons they love it. And then, you help them find what that roadmap is, and then gently help them along that. And there you go. It's not a difficult model.
Well, and we were having a discussion like this in a previous podcast, and they brought up the concept of a ladder, and I brought up the concept of, okay, here's the goals that we're trying to achieve, and this hit me as you were talking that here's one possible way for people to really develop this courage and the bravery to make that change. Because, all right, here's my goal. It's at the top of the ladder. So if we go to the previous rung, what has to happen there in order to achieve that goal? And all of a sudden you go to rung, previous rung, previous rung, previous rung. And all of a sudden you get down to the here and now and they're going, wow, I have got to make this change if I really want to accomplish that goal.
That's
And I
great.
think it's
Love
so
that.
wonderful when people can become a little bit analytical and work backwards from that
Yeah,
goal rather than jumping forward and
that's
realizing,
yeah.
it's step by step, I can climb that ladder, but I've got to be willing at this rung to do what I have to do in order to get to the next rung up.
Yeah, absolutely. The Stephen Covey start with the end in mind. Absolutely right. Um, yeah, I couldn't agree more that the model that I've developed for adaptability intelligence is also a ladder. It's only got 4 rungs, but the basic philosophy says that if you can learn to control your fear, and you can, then you are much less likely to feel anxious or feel anxiety about whatever it is that you think and imagine might be waiting for you over the horizon or around the corner. And once you've managed to control your fear and manage your anxiety, then you can start seeing change as an opportunity for relevance, to make a difference and to add value to society, if we're not getting too overblown here. And then ultimately, it is about then using change as a vehicle to explore the boundaries of what you yourself are capable of doing. And if that is in any way translated into what your personal goal is, then absolutely you work backwards and say, well, if you want to see changes, even negative change, as something positive, we need to figure out how you're going to work on your fear and anxiety. Otherwise, you're never going to get past those stages,
Yeah.
and you're going to be perpetually in a vicious cycle, digging yourself a big, deep hole that becomes too big, too deep for you to pull yourself out of it, which is why lots of anxiety therapies, like talking therapies, being open and transparent and vulnerable, they all rely on the energy of others, which is one of the key things that I
Yeah.
help my clients with. That you know, talking is good.
Well, and it always does. It always boils down to that fear and anxiety. And I love how you've kind of separated the two because one is, as you say, real to some degree, but the anxiety is the emotion that we have allowed to occur in our lives because of that fear. And to be able to change that mindset and be able to recognize that, okay, I'm starting to feel anxious. Why? Why? And all of a sudden, as you start to look at that and kind of step outside of yourself and start to really analyze what's going on, that can
Yep.
make such a difference. Now, I know you've got some good stories. Any of them that you can share as far as working with clients and what has happened for them?
I suppose the most common generic one that I deal with corporate clients, the biggest problem that people have, and I'm smiling, is that they get promoted, not that they lose their job. Because if people lose their job, it's pretty simple as to what you have to do, and helping them, and all of those mechanisms that are in place in corporate society, recruitment consultants and CVs, and there's a kind of set process. But what happens when you actually get what you wish for, and or don't, and you're promoted into a role that is way beyond you? When you know that people like Michelle Obama have got imposter syndrome, then you know that anybody can get it, right? And imposter syndrome is absolutely. I am surprised. In the time that I've set up this business, I had no idea just how prevalent imposter syndrome
Okay.
is.
Explain,
And it's a
define imposter syndrome for the audience.
Oh, I'm not good enough. I am not as good as everybody thinks I am. I don't deserve to be here. I don't deserve to have what I've got. And I'm a complete fraud. And at some point, somebody's going to find me out.
Okay.
And if I'm promoted, then they're going to find out faster.
And yet they want their promotion. They want their
Yeah,
promotion, but then
yeah,
once
of
they
course,
get
because
it,
because they've had that conversation with me. They've defined what the pot of gold looks like at the end of their rainbow, where they're trying to get to in their life. And this role is absolutely a part of the roadmap. So I know I want it, but I don't want it. I want it, but I don't want. I can do this. I haven't got a clue how to do this. All these things are going on in our mind. So the thing to do is really to help people just rationalize, tether them back to planet Earth, and just say, why do you think you, and I have done this, I did this just quite recently actually with somebody, but I'm trying to keep it reasonably generic, that that person was saying exactly all of those things. I'm going to get found out. And I said, okay, why do you think you've been promoted? So don't use their words, use their new bosses' words. So why were they given? So use somebody else's words, because we're much more likely to believe other people than ourselves. I'm the least trustworthy person here. I don't know what I'm talking about, and I don't deserve this role. That's the mindset that we're in. So why do they think that you are worthy? Can you call on any experience that you've been through that would make you think that actually you've got the basic foundations? And the gap here, there's a gap. There should be a gap. Nobody goes into a new role fully competent. Otherwise, it's not a challenge and it's not an adventure. But that gap may be smaller than you think. And it's really just a question of talking them through, working through with their fears and their anxieties. And, I've got a whole bunch of tools that can help people deal with that. And I mentioned rational thoughtfulness. That's a really useful one, because it forces people to have a rational conversation with them. And most of the time, anxiety is not rational. In small doses, anxiety can actually be really helpful. The problem is we're not very good at containing anxiety to small doses.
Right.
So
one of the things that you
really
mentioned,
about.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Oh, I was going to say, one of the things that you mentioned that I saw in one of your talking points was talking about a client that was self-sabotaging. And that really struck me, because I think so often in life we find ourselves self-sabotaging and preventing ourselves from actually accomplishing what we could accomplish. Can you share the story? Can you share that story with the audience?
I can. I can absolutely share that. So, this person, it's quite kind of tiring, and it's frustrating when somebody doesn't see. I've been a CEO. I've led teams of hundreds of people based on 4 continents, and the hardest and easiest part of my job has been pulling the egomaniacs down off their misguided pedestals, when they think that they're so much better than they actually are. It's frustrating to do the other way around, though, when you are trying to convince really good, talented people that they are better than they are. And you see that if you don't solve this problem, and if this problem doesn't get solved, then the trajectory that you can see for that person, for where they're going versus what their potential could take them to, that those lines are just going to diverge exponentially, and this person is going to be a waste of talent, and dare I say it, in my opinion, a waste of life. And that's why I'm so keen that people embrace change, even the tough stuff, because it's really existential about why we're here. So anyway, this person just wasn't having a bar of it. That they wouldn't accept that they were ready to step up, that they were as good as I was saying. They thought I was just being a nice coach. Sorry, I've just got some buzzing there. Sorry. And so it was really, again, just a question of talking through. And when their mind was running away with them, I used another of my favorite tools, which is mindfulness, with them. Now, it's good these days. Everyone knows what mindfulness is. And don't claim to be an expert. I certainly don't do any of the technical stuff, yoga and breathing and meditation and all of that. To me, even at its most base level, which is just that concept of living in the moment, it is the perfect antidote to anxiety. And here's why. Remember, I said anxiety is about your perceived negative future state. So what we make for ourselves is this exponential curve going into the future where we fall off a cliff. Well, the more that we can live in the moment, the further back up that cliff we bring our mind and our thoughts. Now, I don't claim to be perfectly mindful. I don't always live just in the moment. But the more that you can live in today and understand that, mindfulness is about letting go of the future, letting go of the past, letting go of judgment, and just accepting things and appreciating things for what they are right here, right now, then by definition, the more that you're doing that, the less, by definition, that you can feel anxious. And it's that anxiety about, if I accept this job, if I dare to believe that I'm as good as this guy's saying I am, then all of these expectations will be upon me. And that's a burden. I just don't think this person just didn't think that they were capable of doing those things. And what you've got to do is rationalize with them, make them live in the moment, make them turn all of that energy in their mind that was going towards the anxiety. Here's the thing, right? Your brain only weighs 3% of your body weight, but it consumes 20% of your energy. So when people say that anxiety is exhausting, they're not talking metaphorically. It actually consumes calories, and it is genuinely exhausting. And if Penn State University are right, then most of that energy is wasted. And my job is to help people, the self-sabotagers or the people who think they've got imposter syndrome, is to help them use all of that energy, and turn it on its head. It becomes a double whammy. Not only have we neutralized that negative, but we've then got all of that energy available to us to actually do the rational thoughtfulness, so that I can have a proper conversation with myself about, am I really thinking the right thoughts when I say I'm not good enough? And 9 times out of 10, if I'm telling somebody that they're good, I'm pretty tough. I was a pretty tough CEO. If I'm telling people they're good enough, then the chances are they probably are, and they'll come to that conclusion. And in this case, I got most of the way there.
Great. So let me ask you a question. How do people find you? And I know you've written an ebook. What's the name of that book, and how can people access that book? As far as, what is it called? Mastering Adaptability?
That's right. Yeah. So everything you need to know about the work that I do is on highperformancechange.com. That's all one word, highperformancechange.com. There's the ebook on there. There's access to the ebook. There's lots of blogs on there. There's videos. It's all free. The ebook is free. It's for anybody who wants it. It's there, and I'm delighted to open the doors to whoever is interested.
Oh, wonderful. And so as we close, is there a final message that you'd like to share with the audience?
Oh, there is. And it is this. And what really excites me, and it comes back to an earlier point, the only thing that I would want anyone to take away and remember about anything that I've said is this: it is entirely possible to become more adaptable. It is not something that is baked into your DNA and that you're just lucky or not lucky enough to be born with. We call it a form of intelligence because it can be learned and applied, just like maths or music or martial art. Adaptability intelligence is just another form of intelligence, and you can learn it. We've provided a roadmap that will take you from the fear of change through to the freedom to change. And although there's only 4 steps on that ladder, it's life-changing. And anybody who can do it if they want to.
Wonderful. Well, Rich, thanks so much. This has been a great conversation.
I've really enjoyed it. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, I
Appreciate
really
it.
appreciate it. And folks, I hope this has made a difference for you, and get on that website. I've actually gone there. It's fascinating. And to have an ebook that you can download is really tremendous. And thank you for that, Rich. So meanwhile, folks, thanks for listening. Hope you'll join us again soon. This is Dr. Doug saying namaste.